I am ready to go.
Okay, right you are. Right, welcome to SRFC Online. This evening I'm talking to Derek Miller, an award-winning thriller writer about his first and quite excellent post-apocalypse novel, which is launching today. Before we get going, as I'm sure you've noticed, this is our first attempt at a live broadcast. We've had a few trial runs, they worked okay, but as I'm sure people have spotted, it's not going quite so well this evening. So once we finish this talk, the talk will, once again, I hope, appear on Facebook as a recording, and we're also going to be posting it to our YouTube channel, where you can find more than 100 readings and interviews from and with science fiction and fantasy authors. There's a lot to look at. New things are going up regularly, including, coming soon, an exclusive reading by Adrian Selby from his new book, Brother Red. But now, our author today has already made a name in the competitive world of crime and thrillers. His debut, Norwegian by Night, not only being named as one of the Economist's books of the year, but also winning the CWA Gold Dagger Award, and like all his books since, has been nominated for or won awards around the world. Well, he's now done with the world and has written a post-apocalypse novel, which very unusually tackles how society can reclaim a culture in a post-internet age. It's already gathered momentum, and in the way of books which people are interested in, I notice some SRFC authors and regulars have remarkably managed to get hold of copies, even though it's published today. Their praise has been unanimous. I'm going to add to it. It's thrilling and nuanced, and the world building is really incredible. It's a real page turner too. Please welcome, reading from Radio Life, Derek B. Miller.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's a big introduction for these super relaxed. It is, because when I heard your name, I thought, a relaxed fantasy club. That sounds fantastic. But then I heard it was a super relaxed fantasy. And that sounded intimidating. I'm not sure that Barry White in pajamas is super relaxed. So I wasn't sure how to prepare for that kind of a vibe. But anyway, here I am. You have the book. I do not have the book. I have what's called the advanced reader copy, or the ARC, which is the uncorrected proofs, which means that not only do I have the wrong cover, but I have some of the wrong words inside it. So you have the definitive version of the book that I wrote, and which I've never held in my hand. Discussions will be had with my publisher, who is otherwise absolutely superb. But so I've never read for only about 5 minutes, usually because I keep going on and on. So I tried to find something about that long, and something where you don't have to know that much. So I'll see if I can give you 30 seconds of background, and then I'll just dive into a bit of reading. Super relaxed reading, because I decided I wasn't going to go with something too up-tempo. It is hundreds of years in the future. People live in an Olympic stadium that was built towards the end of the 21st century. So about 100 years from now, maybe 80 years from now. It is a technological and artistic wonder, and is somewhere in the American Northwest. But they have no idea they're in the American Northwest. They have no idea that the world is round. Because there is an old children's fable that goes like this, which will set the stage, and then I'll give you the other bit. The children's fable, which begins the book, goes like this. The ancients decided that the earth was no longer safe for their knowledge, and so they put it all in the sky and hid it away in the clouds. But the sun considered the sky her own domain, and so she scorched the clouds and burned them off. After that, no knowledge could rain down on the people of the earth. Their memories grew weak, the land grew dry, and in the cold, they had to start again, learning to make fire from sticks. The stadium is now called the Commonwealth. Taking a cue, me as the author taking a cue from Walter Miller Jr.'s A Canticle for Leibowitz as a launching point as an idea, a 1959 novel that won the Hugo. These people are seeking out and collecting any scraps of information or what they call finds from troves that they can. But so few books remain, so few things, because 100 years, everything, we're already moving things to the cloud, right? All our photographs, our videos, our music, things that were used to be artifacts in our house, LPs and coffee table books and the rest, aren't. And give it more time, it is a perfectly reasonable supposition that it'll all be there. So what happens if it's all not there? Two raiders, people who go out, Henrietta and Graham, who are a married couple in their 40s, late 40s, have gone off to find things. And one of the things they've come back with is a piece of paper that has notes of music on it. There are very few people at the stadium who can play music or know anything about it. But there is one, and there's one electric piano, which still works, whereas the other instruments they've collected, violins, trumpets, none of them work, and none of them can be fixed. It's beyond the scope of any of their artisans. But this they found, and they brought it. So this is what's called, Moshe is working as an evaluator. He sees a thing that's come back as value. In the room stands the electric piano. It has 88 keys, 52 white, and 36 black. It has no strings to break or wood to warp, so its tone and action remain perfect. And the stadium has electricity enough to power it. Moshe, son of Tikva, plays the piano. 34 years old and works by day as a foreman on construction projects. For military service, he is part of a phalanx, but the evaluators have spoken to General Winters because they do not want his unique hands to see war. When he was 6 years old, he was tested for aptitude like all children entering the agoge. He was found to have a rare and native understanding of the patterns that create harmonies. He was initially taught to play by the two pianists of the Commonwealth, and was then allowed to learn on his own. He was both dexterous and studious, and by the age of 12, there was no new music to teach him, the library having been exhausted. Instead, he was left to create his own, so he took it upon himself to gather the oldest people together and ask them to share any songs they knew, from their travels, from their parents, from their grandparents, from their dreams. He transcribed them into music that the scribes copied and had the runners hide. At formal events and rare informal evenings, he entertains in the Great Hall. He also teaches students. To support the Central Archive, he responds to requests from the chief evaluator for arts and literature. It's not often that he is called to this task, but he welcomes it every time. He was called tonight. In his chamber, where he lives alone but pines for Anushka, who said last month they were finished, but he's not so sure, Moshe bathes and scrubs his hands red in preparation for visiting the music room. When he arrives, he removes his shoes at the entrance and dons his waiting slippers. He arrives at the piano rested and clean and pristine. The piano is white. He has been told it draws power from the walls and possibly his own movements. How it works matters less to him than what it does. To the far left of the piano, above the keys, there is a button as clear as glass. He presses it and it glows blue, signaling the instrument's readiness to obey. The new documents retrieved from the trove have already been positioned on the piano. He studies them, touching nothing. The paper's old, but not the oldest he has seen. It's unfaded, not yellowed or rimmed with crust. He can read the language at the top of the page. He recognizes the name of the composer, a strange name that no one has. The letters and numbers mean nothing to him. BWV 988 aria. For a moment, he sits with the notes. The room has 150 seats arranged like an amphitheater, a semicircle around the piano, which sits on the stage. The sound in here is excellent, but it changes when the room is filled. For no reason, he looks up and notices two figures seated in the back. He squints and after a moment recognizes their faces, the commanders. He waves it once and Graham lifts his hand. Moishe looks down at the sheet of paper again and forgets the audience. He has a job to do and they, of all people, will not interrupt. Beyond English, Francais, and Espanol, music is the only other language he knows to have survived. Moishe does not find this surprising because to him, it is the language of the angels. And if only one language were going to survive the rise and the emptying of the world, surely it would be music. It will be the language spoken by the dead so that no one will ever be alone in heaven. There is a logic to every piece of music, however modest or complex. This one has no time signature. So he has to reach out with his heart beyond 400, even 600 years to understand the feeling that this person, this Bach, might have wanted him to feel. BWV 988, the Goldberg Variations. Excuse me. Reading before he plays, he sees that the notes are very simple at first. After several measures, they grow sophisticated. It suggests the need for an emotional maturity from the very first note. Otherwise, the integrity will be compromised. He starts to play and quickly stops. Too fast. He slows down, much slower. Slow the way a drop of water falls from an icicle after a thaw. He needs to reach beyond the boundary separating this moment from centuries before the entire destruction of the gone world to find the emotion that this composer was feeling when he penned the notes. Once Moishe finds a balance between melody and movement and mood, he plays again. These two notes with rests, a pause, three more, like pebbles dropping into water together, and then six that are given space to breathe, separate from one another, but reaching, calling out, carrying the sensation forward. Moishe plays the aria for 3 minutes. After 3 minutes, he lifts his shaking hands from the piano and weeps.
Oh, thank you very much. That was terrific. I remember that passage very vividly from the book. And when I read it, I went online and I went and found the Bach aria, which is what that one was. And it's very well chosen. It really carries the sort of the sense of a melancholy feeling of something beautiful and lost. I thought it made reading the next few pages feel very emotive indeed. So firstly, congratulations on publication.
Thank you.
So where did, this is the biggest question, where did all of this come from?
My head. It came from my head. How did it get in there? I don't know. But what triggered it to get out, which might be the question, it depends how far back I go. And so but most correctly, I was watching this 2012 documentary called Side by Side. Keanu Reeves was in it. He was the interviewer. I don't remember who the director was, sorry. But anyway, it was very good. And what was interesting about it was that it was capturing the moment in time when the film industry or the movie industry was beginning really the transition from actual film to digital. And so it was about all the debates about, what's going to happen to film and what's going to happen to this and what are we losing in the soul of cinema and all this other stuff. And it was, it was interesting. But at the very end, some really, really heavy hitters, George Lucas, Martin Scorsese, a bunch of others, were asked the question about the future, about the archiving of movies. And there was a big debate about it because it turns out that a lot of things that were filmed on digital, for example, back in the 80s are literally unreadable now because we don't have the players, because it isn't just Betamax and VHS. There were a lot of different formats. So they had to actually save the cassette with the content on it with the machine in order to archive it. Because, you know, we got the electricity, but over time, what happens to the equipment, right? Etc. So anyway, there's a lot of debate about what would happen in a couple of 100 years about whether or not films that we're making today will even continue to exist. And one cinematographer named George Boyle said, in the vernacular, because we're not going to archive this stuff. So I got in touch with him because Martin Scorsese and George Lucas were really, really busy. But I was able to get in touch. Got me thinking about it, and then well, I'll tie this off now, but this notion of the world forgetting everything is not new. The premise, and it was played around with in various science fiction stories in the 50s, and I have a list of some of the big impact on me was Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter Peter. Destroy ourselves because I've written about Walter elsewhere, but Walter also he did 55 bomber missions during World War II. He was partly responsible for the destruction of the Abbey at Monte Cassino, which at the time was also sheltering. Starting premise from a completely different civilization. So direct conversation in a way with Canticle for Leibowitz. They're almost like two entirely different visions. I mean, it's not a pastiche, and I'm not playing off the book, but if there were two different visions for what the problem is, what the world could look like, what we would do about it, but from the same starting point, that's where I wanted to go. And so these things came together, and then off we go.
Right. I very much gathered that from the book. Can I just, sorry, I apologize to the people watching. We're having a bit of connectivity issues here. I've actually already sent a list of discussion points to Derek. So I seem to have the worst internet connection. If I drop out completely, hopefully there'll still be some stuff to talk about.
I just kept talking. I have no idea if people saw you going in and going out, the dragon appearing out of nowhere. I'm hoping this isn't me and my preparations for this event, you know, which was pretty much.
No, I think it's completely my internet connection. But yeah, so I mean, just so people know the book that you're talking about, it's this one, Leibowitz. Ta-da! Which came out in 1959. This is the 60th anniversary edition, which was produced by Galance in 2019. Yes, I mean, that definitely came across that you'd put together a philosophy of how people dealt with the loss of knowledge. And in Canticle for Leibowitz, it turned into a kind of religious experience. And it was conveyed through the storage and the religion and the way that stories get retold and then reassessed in that way. Whereas in Radio Life, it felt very much like you developed opposing views on how to manage knowledge from first principles. Do you think that's fair?
That's right. Oh, is that a question or a statement?
It was, yes.
Well done there. Nice, good. Nice job, Magnus. You want to ask me about it? You just answered it. It's. What do you want to know? Why did I do it?
I was thinking about the philosophy that you put together in Radio Life. You had different sects, different tribes with opposing views about how to manage, how to attempt to reassess and recover knowledge which had been lost prior to what you call the fire deluge.
Yes. I am very interested. Should I do the carrot version or the stick version? Let me complain. I am very, very, very tired of, so I'm a huge science fiction fan. I love science fiction. I love the books. I love the movies. I watch more or less anything. But I've also had it up to here. Part of it's my age, part of it's my education, part of it's I've seen every trope done and everything else. But part of it is just bad writing, which is I'm really getting sick of when they have a few people take every scenario where they have to send a couple of people into space to save the world. They're going to Mars, they're going to save the whatever. What could be more important than these people working together, getting along, and having a proper temperament, right? And you never see that. You never see it. They're always annoying and complaining, and somebody's whining, and they're opinionated, and this one's religious, this one's secular, and this, let alone would I send them off on a mission to save, so, and Prometheus from the Alien saga was exactly like this, and I don't care how pretty it was stupid. I said so, and you can tell them I said so. It was gorgeous, but it was dumb. What I like is when really, really smart people doing the absolute best they can really screw it up. That's interesting, because you're with them every step of the way, and then you realize that something must not be working, because and what I find interesting is when these people are doing the best, that there's an entirely different conceptualization, entirely different way of imagining the problematic and the solution. And this is true of life, because of what Isaiah Berlin called incommensurabilities. It'll be on the tests, so you should write it down. There's what this means in short is that values for example, justice, that what we have is enough, then why risk the destruction of the world again by following in the footsteps of those who clearly doomed it in the first place? And so what you end up with is opposing philosophies that are diametrically opposed, but they're both animated by the same core value, which is, to make it simple, truth, justice, and beauty, right? They like these things. So this isn't nihilists versus the people on the hill. These are people who all want good life and believe in this. And the result is they are going to go head to head, because you have a choice now between remembering and forgetting, and which one is going to help us get through. And I find that kind of conflict way more interesting than, that, particularly if you can get people moving. I mean, there's a lot of action and adventure and things flying around. It's a busy book. I mean, it's not just piano life. So, I mean, this, I'm making it sound, heavy and weighty and philosophical.
It's a page turner.
what he said.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a good, complete story as well. It's really a terrific book. I'm sorry I dropped out there, so I'm going to ask you a question which I think follows on, but it might be exactly what you've just been talking about.
I'll pretend it's not, and I'll say something new.
So it was. It talks about when these opposing philosophies about what to do with this knowledge. So is there a sense that you are looking at who gets to decide the power of redaction, the power of censorship? Is that something which you had a view on when you went into this?
One wants to write a book that is responsive to the time that we're in, but not trapped in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think what is still relevant about Canticle for Leibowitz, aside from it's fun to read, it genuinely is just a fun read, is that his thoughts might have been bound and situated in the 1950s or early 60s, whatever you like, the nuclear age, right? The danger of the nuclear age. But the fundamental questions he's asking are still our questions, and we're still wondering, and we still go to science fiction all the time to see how other people have wondered and imagined about things that we're facing, could be facing, or a parallel, alternative, counterfactual history that brings greater light on ourselves. Science fiction is the domain, for doing this. And I'm happy to include, fantasy does this as well, but it grapples with it in a slightly different way, because it can deal with all the same moral challenges, all the issues of justice, many things that science fiction does as well. I think science fiction, at least ostensibly, tries to sort of engage what we view as real problematics in a way that fantasy can do and often does do, but is alleviated from the burden of necessarily trying. For my 2 cents about science fiction fantasy.
Very good. A well-discussed topic, but that's a good take on it.
I imagine that has come up before.
So yeah, well, talking about genre, you came from a background writing thrillers. I found out in this discussion that you are a science fiction fan and have been for your whole life. How do you find those two worlds, the science fiction publishing world and the...
Well, I just got into sci-fi, so I have not actually talked to almost anyone but you seem very friendly, so we're off to a good start. Publisher's been great. I have no idea. What I can tell you is that we do hold on to this notion of genres pretty tightly, and there does come a certain point at which you have to say, this author seems to be interested in, for example, big philosophic, quixotic adventures, with rich characters who are in situations that feel very real to me, and that pulls me through. And I think that is true of everything I've written. With Norwegian by Night, it's an 82-year-old, Jewish American vet from the Korean War on the run through the Scandinavian forest in Norway with a little Balkan kid. So it's both a family drama and a chase through the woods thriller. I did not even realize it was a crime novel at the time I was writing it. I was trying to write this intergenerational story of this and that, and they're like, no, it's a crime novel. I'm like, dude, whatever it takes to sell the book. you do your thing. I've already done mine. So, okay. With The Girl in Green, I wrote a PhD in international relations, and I had 7 years of knowledge of the Middle East, through which I've traveled extensively. And I had a tremendous number of stories that I'd experienced and read about that I needed some way of dealing with in a different way. And so The Girl in Green is a huge war epic that, is more similar to Joseph Heller, and Cervantes. I mean, it is a quixotic adventure of these two men trying to save this girl who may or may not even be out there. Yes, it was shortlisted for the Gold Dagger Award, and that's great. But I guess I was a thriller writer then too. Here, it is a big post-apocalyptic, but it's about a civilization on the rise. It's not about, this is, I heard somebody call it hope punk, and I thought, I kind of like it, you know what I mean? Because there's this old, I have an old copy of the Oxford English Dictionary, this old abridged OED from the 50s. And it's taped up. I think I took it out of the room for the benefit of this interview, but it's one of those things. And I like to go through, they have a little check mark for obsolete words. And one of the obsolete words that's in there that I'm quite fond of is detenebrate. And it means to free from darkness. Now, how it is we have been, yeah, right? Now, how it is we've managed to go without this word in this time, I don't know, but I'm bringing it back. And I think if this notion of hope punk as a sort of as a subgenre, as a cluster of familiar works, if you will, has any coherence, to me, you can leverage off this word and think it is writers who are seeking, to free the writer's soul from darkness, which means that you have to situate us in the darkness at the beginning. For example, but not necessarily a post-apocalyptic environment, being dead, I don't care what it is, but it has to be oriented towards the light. And if it gets there, great. If it doesn't, that's part of the story. But that notion of that orientation, that sense of journey and that possibility has to be part of it. Whereas I stopped watching, but at some point I felt like with The Walking Dead, which I originally really liked, at some point I'm like, they're literally eating each other and there's no end in sight. So I'm like, I got that feeling from Lost. I don't know if you ever watched that years and years ago. It was the coolest first season ever. And then you realize the writers don't know the ending. They really don't. Like Battlestar Galactica, they clearly didn't know the ending, but you're stuck with them anyway. Like with this one, they really didn't know. They were just getting really happy to be paid. And with well, anyway, I am going. My answers are going on too long, but there.
Oh no, that was good. That was great.
There is something about orienting that way, and I think that with Radio Life, I want to do that. So the long and short is, all my books have these kinds of qualities, and so yeah, I'm using another genre, but at the same time, I don't feel that I've drifted very far away from what I write. So if which in one way feels sort of self-serving, like, oh my God, don't be afraid, read my book. But on the other hand, I really did write it. So how far away from myself could I possibly have gone? Where could I have gone?
I absolutely felt when I was reading it that the characters, even the antagonist, it turns out in inverted commas, the antagonist characters, they had a plan, and that plan was to make something better for themselves. Yes. There weren't really any characters, maybe one or two back in the stadium, who had sort of dried up a bit. I mean, there was a bit of a difference, I thought. So it talked about the archivists versus the keepers, and the preservationists versus revisionists, if you like. But I also felt there was a bit of a nuance between the generations. So the people who were very youthful.
Well, I thought to myself, in a society that values knowledge, the old are going to look on the young as, as less than, right? And not just shorter and faster versions of themselves, but, in a society that values knowledge, the young ones have less, right? And therefore they need to be used for things that young people are good for, like carrying things and running fast. So that's what's happening. But the truth is that these young people, the two of the young, the two, it's almost an all-woman cast, by the way, which I realized almost after I wrote it. But Elamisha and Alessandra are these two teenage girls who get trapped with a trove of knowledge, which I won't go into because it's very plot related, but there is a serious trove of knowledge that they have come across, and they're learning things that nobody else knows, that nobody has known in hundreds and hundreds of years. And it looks like this knowledge can do as much harm as good. And they are suddenly, while up here, the Commonwealth and the Keepers have big ideological, philosophical differences, you know, down here in a sense, real life, these two young girls, these two teenagers, are enacting and dealing with exactly the same problematics that are being dealt with up here. Why? Because the problems that have concretized, in a way, it's not a great word, but they've solidified, they have become, I guess, like concrete, if I'm really going to double down on it, right? It's awful, isn't it? So, but it's but these things that have taken on, or here they've been reified. We'll go we'll go upscale intellectual. Is being played out in daily life just for these two girls who are trapped with this stuff, because they're realizing that these things are real problems. So taking an ideological position on it, or just following orders, sorry about the evocation of that phrase, but isn't enough. You literally have to you have to figure it out. And what they're finding is that there's a level of nuance and complexity and challenge to all this that they didn't anticipate, and they end up taking on slightly different opinions, you know, but as, again, reasonable people doing their best. And the decisions that these two teenage girls make in a bunker ends up having cataclysmic, world-changing effects as a result. And I love that, because I believe the world is driven more by decisions than it is by structural matters.
Yeah, and I just feel I always point out for people listening that you're describing that as if they're having sort of an intellectual debate, and in the sense they are. It's actually it's the hub of a really thrilling moment or kind of like thread in the book, where they have this weird one-way communication with the outside world.
This is the problem. I just, you know, I'm from New England. I got a doctorate. I'm Jewish. I just keep babbling on about this stuff.
It's been terrific.
The writing is good, but the interview is awful, because I make it sound so dull. I swear to God, it's interesting. It's just, you know, really.
It hasn't been dull at all. I really promise. I feel I might have led you down the sort of slightly, I don't know, I've pushed it down this intellectual thread, where in fact it's a book full of, it's got lots of lovely world-building details. One of the things I really, really liked is how it used knowledge as kind of currency. There's one point where somebody buys something by teaching someone how to tie a knot. There's got I hope this isn't too much of a spoiler, it sort of comes in fairly early in the book. There's a weird issue where all of their knowledge seems to be color-coded, and it turns out that's because they found an ancient copy of Trivial Pursuit. They've sort of reconfigured that into the archival categorization of everything they know. I mean, these are all terrific details. I thought that it's such a nuanced book, and these sort of, it takes you through the world build as the story happens. So it's not doing stop-start, which occasionally happens. It's really letting it happen through the character, through the plot. It's a really good read.
That's great. I really appreciate it, and it was a lot of fun. I remember the first time, because just that bit is there's a box, a trunk, you know, like a trunk, and you know, in a bomb shelter, they had put a lot of stuff, non-electronic stuff, like Trivial Pursuit and a bunch of books and actual physical books and things. And this ended up being found by this teenage girl named Lily, 50 years before the book starts. And she finds Trivial Pursuit. I assume it's the 2086 version or whatever. But I got a bunch of copies of it, and I thought, you know, because the thing about it is that, for one thing, first of all, the name is perfect, right? They're pursuing trivia, right? So, which is, what else could they be doing? The second thing is, it's got colors and little things. So it lends itself perfectly to flags and logos and all this other kind of thing. It's all that part's all tongue in cheek, but where it gets, it has all this tantalizing information, like the world is round. We've been to the moon, right? By that time, there was a mission to Mars. bummer about how it turned out, you know? And, you know, there's all these pieces of, you know, the name of the first maps and the first map makers and, you know, trivia, but trying to create a narrative out of just the pieces on the back of a trivial is you can't really do it. And so you're left completely, you know, confused. It's a mosaic with 99% of the tiles missing.
But they infer a lot. They get lots from it.
But they get a lot from it because you really can. And like and you extract as much as you can. Like, for example, there was a calendar and the calendar had numbers. It started at 0 and seemed to go to about this point. I mean, and these things were marked. I mean, the amount that you can patterns that a conscious mind can pull out from some very small amounts of information, in this case, I guess it was mine, but hopefully it'll be somebody else's. But was a lot of fun. But also it gave them a way to, if you look at the vast amount of knowledge that's everything, just not everything that's known, right? In a sort of Monty Python-esque, Douglas Adams-y kind of way. Everything's, you know, how do you divide everything that's known up into some ways that are in any way manageable and ideally color-coded? And the answer was Trivial Pursuit. Yeah. I had to use it. And so my friend laughed at me. I'm like, I got this idea for a book, and they base it all on Trivial Pursuit. They're like, great. I mean, Bogart that book.
I think we should probably wrap up soon. But I was going to posit that, as well as the idea that you put about the, you know, your alternative to the library bits, kind of like philosophy of post-apocalypse, there was also one that takes us getting from it, and you touched on this with the documentary that you were talking about, is that recovery of culture becomes sort of sharply more complex. And with like exponentially more difficult as societies become more technologically advanced. And so as you get to the internet, it becomes actually, you know, you're relying on really fragmented bits of information. So you don't have the Library of Alexandria, you've got other things. But I thought the story took that premise and managed to sort of feel its way to an optimistic resolution from it. I was just wondering if you're optimistic about this.
You mean after we destroy the world? Do I think
I guess so. I mean, I'm not anticipating destroying the world, but I mean that that the thread that technology is taking us on, which is putting everything in the cloud.
I think we're only going to get through this if we take cooperation and values very, very, very seriously, because the unfettered drive for knowledge, innovation, and creativity, driven by something other than its value to society, which currently it is not driven by that, needs a big steering wheel. You know, I'm not a socialist, I'm not a communist, I'm not an anti-capitalist and anything else. And I think it's a wonderful engine for economic society. And I think it creates possibilities for freedom and choice and the rest of all those other tropes. But it's like American cars. It's all engine, no handling, right? And our cars are the metaphor for how we live, how we think, how we act, which is we go really straight, really fast, really loudly, and hope that you don't bump into something along the way. You know, growing up in the 80s, as I did, you know, I thought all police cars screeched for 19 feet around every turn and whatever. And I realized, no, you know, Europeans have figured out that you actually can take a turn by measuring the relationship between the ability to steer and the power, you know, which is a metaphor for our societies, right? So it's not so much, and what I'm worried about right now, no, what I see happening right now empirically is an aggressive assault on multilateralism, on cooperation, on the teaching of ethics and civics, on the notion of our shared responsibilities and duties to one another, a backsliding on democracy, a backsliding on the use of power for good, and a failed sense of urgency and duty to correct the mistakes we've made and to lay the foundations for better things in the future, which really should not be on the wit of man. You know, it, if you'll forgive the phrase, because it isn't. It, you know, it just, you know, I live in Norway. I am in Norway. I'm in a box in Norway there, and you're in a box in London. So, and they're very similar, really, these boxes. But nevertheless, you know, this is a society that, yes, they pump money out of the ground. And yes, they're very, very, you know, eco-friendly and environmentally concerned while selling oil to the rest of the world. I know all this, but, you know, so's the United Arab Emirates. But over here, they've done a very good job of not screwing it up royally. You know, I mean, we can discuss how optimized they've been, but they've taken their natural resources and they found a way to keep society calm. And every school is pretty good, and the healthcare is pretty good. And, you know, people let you merge in traffic because they don't want to kill you, which is really a very big deal, particularly in a society that has plenty of guns. I come from one. Our problem is we want to kill each other. That's the basic issue. That is the fundamental basic issue.
I think I should mention that you're talking about this from actually quite an informed place, because your career prior to being, I think, are you a full-time novelist now?
Yeah, I'm asked that. Yes, I am absolutely a full-time novelist now. I worked at the UN for 10 years. I've worked, but asking if you're a full-time novelist is sort of asking if you like plan on flying full-time. And it's sort of like, I'm flapping my wings a lot, you know. But at some point, I'm either going to reach my destination, I'm going to get tired and die, or I'm going to get shot down. And it doesn't look like I'm going to get shot down with radio light. So you know, so ever onward. But
okay, right, you are. But yeah, if anyone's interested, if you go and have a look at Derek's biography, then not well biography, but also bibliography, then you'll see that there's a lot which he is drawing from a very informed place there. Just that list that you were saying about how you think technology is working out. As you were saying it, as you were talking about all the potential problems, one of the things that occurred to me is that the societies that you drew, especially the one in the stadium, seem to be feeling their way through coming to the right answers to that from first principles. I don't know if that's quite true, but that was certainly how I was thinking.
I don't know. I think they haven't. I think they've reached a point where they haven't quite reached the main problematics yet. I think, you know, you get to. So I'm currently writing the sequel, which is called The Find. For now, although I like that, and you know how it is. But some of the decisions they're making, are going to backfire, and some of the ways that they're seeing the world are going to be challenged at a later date. And I think that's is things are working until they're stressed in a way. And as you start getting into the problems that we're facing now, things like, nanotech, artificial intelligence, or strong artificial intelligence, automated weapons, genetic engineering, the mating of nanotech with, blah, 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 you get into issues that they're trying to do the right thing, but, at one point, allegedly, so is Google.
Yes, don't be evil instruction.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, look, I realise that isn't the most optimistic place for us to leave it, but so I'm going to ask you a final question,
okay.
Which when we do this live, this is almost always the wrap-up question, and you kind of hinted at us already. What have you got coming up next? I've
got all kinds of stuff coming up. So I feel like I should have a cat on my lap, and this is not just a big year for me. This is unique, and I'm using that word correctly. I have 3 books coming out this year, which I'm I'm pretty sure is never going to happen again. It only happens to people like Neil Gaiman, and you know, he doesn't need a plug from me. So I don't care how good he is. I have, this is out today. I have an Audible original called Quiet Time, which is a contemporary family drama set in the coast of New England, which is also partly about technology. It's about a family that unplugs for a year. And one, there's about two families, one who's stuck in the past and trying to get out of it, and the other one who's just trying to get back to the past as much as possible, and how these two families interact and somehow save each other, sort of. And that's a lot of fun. That's a comma tragic thingy mabob. That's out in March. And then for fans of Norwegian by Night, and Sheldon Horowitz, who is the protagonist in that story, I have written the prequel to that, which is called How to Find Your Way in the Dark. And that is set between 1937 and 1947. And that is my, hopefully my Pulitzer Prize, but you know, if it's failing that, it's my you know, okay, the Booker, but you shouldn't have let us compete. You shouldn't have let us compete. I told you, I said, don't, you can have your own prize. This is the problem with Britain. Why did you open it up? Is the Commonwealth not big enough? I don't understand. What did you think was going to happen? Never mind. So yeah, I'm going to go for the Booker on that one. Not my fault. And it's the Sheldon prequel, and I'm very, very proud of that. And I love the book. And Sheldon's back from the age of 11 to 27 or something. So okay. A lot. And I'm writing The Find, which is the follow-up, which hopefully I can publish someday.
Yeah, well, I very much look forward to reading it. Well, that's as you said, this book, Radio Life, is published today. I like it very much. Other people who have both attended SRFC a lot, and also one person who's read their own book at SRFC, have already said how much they like it. They're absolutely right. It's a terrific book. I know it's hard to buy books in real life at the moment, but please, if you possibly can, do support bookshops at this time. Yes. If you go onto the YouTube channel, you'll find lots and lots of readings. I think we've got more than 100 now. There are also interviews, some of which are by the incredible Caroline Mersey, some of which are actually other authors interviewing other authors. And there's a lot of material up there. This, if our technology works, at the moment I'm not feeling as confident as I was before this at saying this. If our technology works, this interview will be up there as well. All that remains for me to do is to thank Derek for coming and talking to us, and congratulating him again on the publication date of his book, Radio Life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'm signing off now. Goodbye, everybody.